Dean, what you've done here is fantastic. And our original concept where we went to TCI and they wanted to celebrate their 40th anniversary and they wanted us to do something with a Model A chassis, we sat down with Dean and we said, what can we do using the Model A chassis from Total Cost Involved Engineering and honor their 40th anniversary? And we sat around and talked and we came up with the idea, how about we get one of the builders in the industry to take a stock Model A, lift the body, put it on a Model A chassis? Well, that sounds simple enough, and while it was not really overly difficult, it was a little bit more complex than that. I thought, well, I've got the perfect guy. So I got a hold of Dean from Hot Rods by Dean, and we went to a couple of other sources we needed. We got a hold of Cougar Tire because we knew we had to have the right combination of vintage looking wheels and tires, but we know the car needed a rake. It had to have some attitude. And we went to Speedway Motors to help us out with all the little ancillary parts. But now, Dean, you found the Model A, and if I'm not mistaken, this is an old, what was the race? The race across America.
Yeah. The Great American Race.
Great American Race back in the early 90s.
Yep.
And this car actually appeared on the table of contents page of the coverage of the story as a stalker. Now, you go over, you pick the car up, you now have a stock Model A. What happened?
Model A, and the whole theory was to build a car without cutting anything on it. We didn't want to alter anything. We didn't want to keep the much original personality of original Model A car, the interior, the gauges, the steering wheel, the column,
the upholstery,
the paint. We wanted to take a Model A that was bone stock that someone has had restored over time and turned it into a not a fast and dirty, but a quick, easy, put-together hot rod overnight.
Now, remember, a hot rod's got to have some horsepower. So we put in, what we put in for a motor and trans?
Speedway gave us a 302 Ford small block because I wanted to do a Ford and a Ford. We got the C4 transmission.
From where did we get that?
TCI supplied the transmission for that. TCI supplied the chassis and the rear end. Curry supplied the rear end, and Coker Tires did the wheels and tires, and we got the stance correct.
Now everyone who's ever built a hot rod, a Model A especially, knows, how did you get a Ford V8 without moving the radiator, without lengthening the frame, without cutting the firewall? How'd that all happen?
The only thing we did on that was I made a custom-made water pump adapter and did electric water pump off the side. And that's what you'll see on the lower part of the passenger side of the front there. And then the only other thing that we changed was fitting and placement of motor mounts and tranny mount to get everything cleared. So we took the stock TCI chassis components, adapted motor mounts to it and tranny mounts, and moved everything forward 5 inches.
What about the exhaust?
The exhaust, we did a crossover under the split pan of the stock 302 Ford pan and did them both out the passenger side.
Tell me about the block huggers. How'd you make? Because the guys were looking at it going, this isn't going to fit. What'd you do?
We took stock block huggers and we put the passenger side on the driver's side and the driver's side on the passenger side. We flipped the two so they go forward to the motor mounts, ran them across each other, and did them.
It worked just fine.
It worked beautifully, and we ran them both out the passenger side as if it was a stock type application.
Now, we haven't mentioned yet, but early hot rods like this would have had either a tube or an I-beam axle.
Right.
This has a TCI chassis that's got the full independent front end. Now, what bolt pattern did we use on the Coker wheels and tires?
It was all 5 on 4 3/4.
Okay, it's a Ford, late model Ford, yeah.
On front and rear, and it's dual bolt pattern, so it would go either way. So
now, what about shocks? What are we doing?
Shocks are the Ride Tech shocks, all 4 corners on coilovers.
So it's modern ride.
Modern ride. The car, when I first picked it up, it had a gear splitter in it with the 4-cylinder. It went 71 miles an hour wide open. It took me about 23 minutes to get there. After we did this conversion, I drove it down the freeway for the first time, hands off the steering wheel at about 101. Now, I don't suggest you do that, but it went down the road smooth as glass, and now you have it.
And speaking of glass, it's all the stock glass?
All stock glass, stock door, stock windows, stock.
So you really literally lifted the body off the stock chassis, put it on the Model A chassis from TCI, and it worked.
And unbelievably, I didn't open up one bolt hole in the body.
Everything fit.
I dropped the bolts in and bolted them in.
What about gaps, door gaps, things like that?
I shimmed the front to get the door gaps. Everybody knows that you have to shim them, get the door gaps right and all that, but outside of that, nothing.
Model A's had the gas tank up here in the cowl, which is not my favorite place. Where's the gas tank on this?
Right here. It's in the stock cowl. And Brian doesn't like that, but we routed everything through the glass bowl, though it just appears like there's actually just oil in it.
Yeah.
And the fuel goes through it down to a fuel pump, a mechanical fuel pump, and
Everything works.
Beautifully.
Now, what if in a Model A, when you're sitting on the inside, there's a carburetor primer.
Yes.
That rod, is it still there?
That's still there. We just made it spring loaded. We cut off the back side of it, and so my kid can sit there and play with it while we're going down the road.
Now tell me, if you sit in a stock Model A, you normally had the headlight controls or the timing control for the ignition to start. What do those rods do now?
Those are still there. The timing advance is going to be eventually the cruise control, and the spark advance, or excuse me, the fast idle was going to be the cruise control, and the timing advanced is now the headlight switch.
Okay, so you made it work, but
That's correct.
did you have to take the steering column apart?
Yeah, we actually it's stock external Model A column
and wheel. Yeah.
And actually the internal is a 57 Chevy shaft.
Yeah.
Re-splined, returned down, made all the bearings and bushings and put it all together, and all Borgeson joints and all that.
So when it comes out, you have your Borgeson U-joints that hook up to the rack and pinion
That's correct.
steering, and okay,
Yeah.
you do that.
Yep.
Well, I got to admit, now the electrics, obviously back then that was 6-cylinder. What are we doing now?
The car,
Or,
luckily,
excuse, I said 6 cylinders.
it
Yeah,
was 6 volt.
Yeah.
Luckily, when we picked up the car, it was already 12 volt converted from
Yeah.
when the gentleman that had restored it. We did replace it all, but it is still all 12. It's 12 volt.
It's a 12
again.
volt.
It's a
Okay, so
12
it
volt
uses
system
an
again.
alternator
and that's
now,
all
and-
was supplied by Speedway, correct?
Okay. And the transmission mounts, the motor mounts, those had to be fabricated.
Correct. And they're rubber mounts, Ford OEM mounts that
you just made fit. Now, in a stock TCI chassis, a Ford motor sits about 5 inches further back. Is that
so
right?
you would have had to flip the firewall or change the firewall, but since we were trying to keep the gas tank, keep the car
Stock firewall.
and without cutting anything on the car,
Yeah.
we had to move everything forward.
Yeah, and when you moved it forward, what about my water pump?
There
now?
was no room for the water pump. There was barely any room for the fan. So placement of those things took a little challenging, but we
you put in an electric water pump?
water pump down low.
Yeah.
From
Is it a Stewart pump?
Stewart pump.
You
Correct.
put in a Stewart electric pump, but then what about the fan? Is it like a electric fan
Yep,
that's on
electric
the radiator?
fan that comes on with a fan temp switch, so it's just like your modern car where it just turns on automatically, turns off automatically.
Yeah, and that was something that came from Speedway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's a Walker radiator that
Walker
we got,
radiator,
yeah,
yep.
that we got from Speedway.
Yep.
What about the headlights, tail lights, all of that?
All stock Model A that we picked up when we bought the car.
It's all just converted to 12
Converted
volts.
12 volt bulbs.
Okay. You going to keep this and drive it a while?
I think I'm gonna.
How about we? It's got a brand new set of Coker wheels and tires on this. How about we run a set through, man? Let's get some 20,000 miles on this.
I think
drive
we're
it
gonna
around
get
the
at
country.
least 20,000 miles
Okay.
on it, and maybe do some donuts in it.
We gotta go drive to an event, drive around on this and have some
We
fun.
have a lot of fun.